speaker is Roberto. Oh, thank you. Um, our first speaker is Roberto Sarmiento. Uh, Welcome so much. Thank you for coming. Roberto is the Legal Services Director at Center for Community Solutions, and his topic today is on poly-victimization, the intersection of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. And so I believe, Roberto, that you can share your screen.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Absolutely.
Um, all right, looks like it should be up at this point in time. All right. Uh, all right, as shared, my name is Roberto Sarmiento. I'm with the Center for Community Solutions. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the Legal and Counseling Services Director, which means that I supervise and administer our legal services programs and more recently, our counseling services programs. I'm going to be talking, as was shared, about poly-victimization, the intersection of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. First, we're going to be going through some definitions that will be helpful to ensure we're kind of all on the same page with an understanding of this topic. Some of you out there as being service providers may have slightly different definitions or understanding, which is definitely understandable because there are variations in this field. These are just general definitions that I will be using today when discussing this topic. What is intimate partner violence? Also referred to as domestic and/or relationship violence, IPV refers to a recurring, chronic, deliberate pattern of abuse that is used to maintain power and control over a current or former intimate partner. So other terms for IPV, because it's a bit of an umbrella term, are domestic violence or DV, spousal abuse, relationship abuse, partner abuse, intimate partner abuse, teen relationship violence, dating violence, and abuse. What is sexual assault? Any unwanted sexual contact that occurs without the person's consent. So then this contact can be by force, manipulation, or coercion. And then what is poly-victimization? So this generally refers to experiencing multiple types of victimization, such as sexual assault, IPV, stalking, or childhood abuse. And then today we're going to be focusing on poly-victims of intimate partner sexual assault. And just to share a little more food for thought, studies have shown that survivors who experience one form of victimization are often at higher risk for others. These multiple traumas can compound the effects of each, leading to more severe psychological, physical, and social consequences. And we're going to be touching on also some of those impacts that survivors, intimate partner sexual assault survivors experience. All right, so I'm going to touch on a little bit about the pervasiveness of intimate partner SA. So poly-victimization through intimate partner sexual assault is unfortunately a severe and pervasive problem. Although this survey that other folks might have seen was done back in 2016, 2017, it does highlight that intimate partner sexual assault is just as pervasive as non-intimate partner sexual assault, as you can kind of see in the left-hand column. All right, overlapping experiences of intimate partner violence and sexual assault survivors. Many survivors of IPV are also survivors of SA or sexual assault, often from the same perpetrator, leading to, unfortunately, compounding traumas. This unwanted sexual contact includes reproductive coercion, unsafe sex practices, and unwanted sexual touching or intercourse. Survivors of IPV and SA also have these overlapping experiences. This may include abusive power and control. So both IPV and SA often involve an imbalance of power. Isolation. Perpetrators of both IPV and SA frequently isolate victims from friends, family, or support networks. Coercion. Emotional manipulation or threats are common tactics in both. And then responses. Many survivors experience fear, self-blame, confusion, and difficulty seeking help. The impacts of experiencing poly-victimization. So there are unfortunately many negative consequences of poly-victimization, and each survivor's experiences are different. Though to run through a few of the big possible impacts, there is the mental health impact, higher rates of PTSD, depression, and suicidal ideation. Survivors may have difficulty establishing trust, leading to strained personal relationships. Then there are the physical health impacts, increased risk of chronic pain, reproductive health issues, and long-term injuries. And then there are the social and economic impacts, employment instability, housing insecurity, and financial hardships. Being a poly-victim survivor of intimate partner sexual assault may also increase the risk for potential lethality by their abuser. On this slide, you'll see some statistics that I'm going to be kind of just running through. So globally, more than 35% of all murders of women are reported to be committed by an intimate partner. In the US, 55% of all homicides are IPV related. 1 in 10 victims of IPV-related homicide were reported to have experienced violence in the month preceding their deaths. And then abusers who also force sex are almost twice as likely to kill their partners as abusers who use physical violence only. Intimate partner SA survivors also face similar barriers to seeking help. These barriers can be emotional, psychological, social, cultural, or institutional. Listed on this slide are some common barriers they may face, including shame and stigma. Survivors may fear being blamed or judged by society, family, or friends for their abuse. In some cultures, discussing the violence or abuse may be considered taboo, which can be further isolation for survivors. Fear of not being believed, fear that community members, law enforcement, medical professionals, or even legal systems will dismiss or minimize their experiences. Fear of reprisal. Survivors may fear retaliation from their perpetrator. This could include the lethality risks as discussed in the previous slide. Fear of not being believed, that community members, sorry, I apologize. I already went through that. Financial constraints. Legal or mental health services can be expensive, and many survivors face financial control from their perpetrators. And then lack of knowledge or misinformation. Survivors may not know their rights or resources available to them. Perpetrators may also provide false information about consequences of seeking help, such as threatening the survivor, which unfortunately the threat is that they might lose custody of their children, or for instance, that there might be an undocumented immigrant, that they might possibly face deportation. There's also language barriers. Survivors who have limited English language proficiency or unable to speak it at all may struggle to communicate with law enforcement. They may struggle to communicate with legal systems, service providers, which again, unfortunately makes it difficult to seek assistance. And then last but not least, there are systemic challenges. Law enforcement, legal systems, and even service providers may re-traumatize victims or lack understanding of the complexities of poly-victimization. Some survivors may have a general mistrust, just again, based off of history or bias, distrust of law enforcement, legal systems, or social services. And this is in particular among marginalized communities, including people of color. So again, these are just some common barriers poly victims of intimate partner sexual assault may face, which can be daunting to overcome without critical support. So then kind of going along that, responses then to poly-victimization, also known as how can we help? Well-designed service responses are crucial for supporting survivors of poly-victimization of intimate partner sexual assault. They may include trauma-informed services. So service providers should definitely be trained up to recognize the signs of trauma and to respond appropriately. Any service provider should be survivor-centered and ensure they are meeting the goals of the survivor and that they are involved in the decision-making process to regain a sense of control. Then there's education and awareness. Raising awareness about dynamics of poly-victimization of intimate partner sexual assault to reduce stigma and increase community understanding of these issues. So offering education to schools, workplaces, communities about recognizing signs of these victimizations, which then ultimately can lead to safer environments for those survivors. And then economic empowerment. Having programs that can provide emergency financial assistance or assistance with transportation, housing, food, clothing, and basic needs are critical. We see this every day at our agency, Center for Community Solutions. Also, connecting survivors to resources in the community that can provide job training, education, and employment services that ultimately can help them achieve financial independence and stability. So now I'm shifting into one area regarding intervention services, which are trauma-informed legal services, which is also where my primary background and expertise is. And though this is not all-encompassing and not the only intervention services to consider for survivors, I'm just highlighting this one area, which may be applicable then to other intervention services. So when it comes to trauma-informed legal services, you first want to approach the support holistically. Lawyers, legal advocates, legal staff, when working with survivors, should be trained to recognize the signs of trauma and provide a holistic response to the needs of each survivor's unique circumstances. Legal services should not just address the immediate legal needs, which is helpful, and though there are broader challenges survivors face that I've named today, and ensuring that you're also addressing those needs too. This type of wraparound support is crucial, supporting a survivor for long-term recovery. Next is you want to ensure your services encompass the empowerment model. No one knows better than the survivor on what's best for them and their family. The goal should be working with survivors to empower them through information, resources, and choice when it comes to their legal options. They should be able to set the pace and direction of the support, always supporting the survivor by respecting their boundaries and needs. You should also always ensure you are sensitive to possible re-traumatization. Survivors, unfortunately, can re-experience or relive the traumatic experiences they face from their abuser. The legal system, unfortunately, still lacks the understanding of the complexities of poly victims of intimate partner sexual assault, as well as, honestly, other victimizations, which can be triggering for survivors. Survivors then greatly benefit from legal support that understands these complexities and is trained up in this work in order to take steps to minimize the possibility of being re-traumatized. An example could be taking steps to accommodate the survivor in court proceedings in order to avoid any direct confrontation with their abuser, such as allowing for remote testimony or ensuring sensitive cross-examination processes. And then finally, with the overlapping impact of being survivors of intimate partner sexual assault, they may require different legal remedies or responses, such as support with restraining orders to ensure immediate safety, child custody and support orders to help protect the survivor and minor children's safety, autonomy, and economic independence, housing rights to protect from eviction, or if needed, move quickly through the early lease termination process. Employment protections that allow a survivor to seek needed accommodations from their employer, such as time off to go to court or to obtain a restraining order. And then understanding their rights as a crime victim in the criminal justice process here in California, including asserting their rights under Marcy's Law, the Victim Bill of Rights in California. One specific legal remedy intersection with being a poly victim of intimate partner sexual assault that I wanted to highlight is when it comes to civil restraining orders. So non-intimate partner sexual assault survivors in California may generally only seek a civil harassment restraining order, or CHRO, which has a high burden of proof called clear and convincing, meaning they have to prove their facts in the case are highly probable in order to obtain the restraining order. Whereas an intimate partner sexual assault survivor may be able to seek a domestic violence restraining order, or DVRO, which then has a lower burden of proof, preponderance of the evidence, meaning they only have to prove their facts in a case are more likely than not, which may be helpful in supporting a higher likelihood of success in obtaining a restraining order to protect themselves and their loved ones. Moreover, domestic violence restraining orders can include additional orders, provisions, beyond just having the perpetrator stay away, that are not allowed in CHROs due to the intimate nature of the relationship with their abuser. These include having their abuser be ordered to move out of a shared residence, transferring a shared cell phone account into the survivor's name, obtaining orders for child and spousal support, obtaining certain property orders to have the survivor have control over certain property, like a shared vehicle, and having the abuser pay certain life necessity expenses like the mortgage, rent, or utility bills. So having legal assistance that understands these nuances and complexities definitely is invaluable assistance as survivors navigate the complicated civil legal system. And so I kind of wanted to close out actually plugging my agency services, as we are a local service provider for poly victims of interpartner violence sexual assaults. So as I shared, I work for the Center for Community Solutions. It is our mission to end relationship and sexual violence by being a catalyst for caring communities and social justice. For those who don't know, CCS started back in 1969, growing out of one of the first women's studies program in the United States at San Diego State University. We are still the only rape crisis center in the city of San Diego. We serve survivors of sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and stalking. Our three main offices are in Pacific Beach, Escondido, and El Cajon. And then here is a list of our services. We provide free, confidential, multilingual, trauma-informed, survivor-centered services. So we provide advocacy services, counseling services, legal services, shelter services. We have a 24-hour, 7 days a week crisis hotline, and we provide prevention and education support. All right, that was my brief presentation. I wanted just to thank you all for allowing me the time to talk about this great topic. And any questions?
While people are either typing their questions in the chat box, or if anyone wants to raise their hand for Roberto, that would be great. Actually, I have a question. How common is it for survivors to request a SART exam if they are a dual victim of intimate partner violence as well as sexual assault? Is that something that the advocates can support?
You know, I don't have a percentage off of the top of my head, and though it does happen, but kind of a barrier to that, if I can share, is a lot of times folks who are in that intimate relationship with someone who had sexually assaulted them or abused them doesn't think that it's sexual assault or sexual abuse, and so they don't move forward with any assistance because of just the fact that this is their loved one. Like, right, this is their husband, this is their long-term partner, like, right, this is someone who wouldn't do that to me. Or even if they did that to me, like, right, that's just part of our relationship, so to speak. Like, right, so they kind of, if I can share from experience from the teams that I supervise here at CCS, what we experience is a lot of times the sexual assault or sexual violence aspects may never come up throughout our entire service. It may at some point be discovered or disclosed through maybe the tail end of our representation, or even though we've asked certain questions. So it is a more sensitive area that may not be disclosed. So I'm picturing, if I can share, that that might be also a low volume, but I don't have a percentage for you when it comes to SARTs.
So there was a question from Myra asking, do you provide shelters or send people to different shelters?
Yes, so CCS does have shelters within our agency. We have three current confidential locations across the county. They were able to have beds and rooms for survivors and or their families too with our agency. We also assist folks with other housing related needs. So we do provide emergency housing related assistance, whether or not that might be financial or discussions with their landlord too. So definitely if folks are in need of some shelters, we can try to connect the best we can. We do have limited resources, just like other agencies. So if we may not be best suited in the moment, we can check to see with other shelters with our collaboration across the county.
And if someone is looking for shelter, they can call the 888-385-4657 number.
Yes, that is the best resource. If someone is in need of emergency shelter, call our crisis hotline. And they're going to be the folks who are going to be able to connect, if at all possible, to our shelter support.
If we have any other questions. And this presentation is being recorded. And Roberto, are we able to provide a PDF copy of your presentation?
Sure, I can email that to you after today.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so at this time, I don't see any other questions. So thank you so much, Roberto, for sharing this really important presentation.
No, thank you. And thank everyone for your time. All right, take care.
Thank you. And I know that Roberto said he has another meeting to go to, so he's trying to squeeze in a lot this afternoon. So again, thank you so much.
All right, no, thank you. Take care.
Thank you. And so, and I hope everyone can hear me. I know that that was a concern. Our next presenter, Marjorie Saylor. She is the care coordinator and the director of Human Trafficking Services and Awareness and the legal liaison at One Safe Place. She's with the district attorney's office. We are so thrilled to have her present to us on human trafficking services. So Marjorie, we have made you co-host, so you should be able to share your screen so that we can see your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I'm just disclaimer, we have some construction going on. And so if you hear some banging, every so often, it's kind of, we just can't avoid it right now. So apologies in advance.
Yeah, and then I think with the room that you're in is a little echoey. So if you could speak up a little bit, that would be great.
Okay, I'll try to speak up.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so just going into this introduction, it's going to be a brief introduction into it. I know a lot of you are already familiar with what human trafficking is. So just briefly going to go through this. This PowerPoint will be available. I will send it in to everyone. It's about a 2-hour presentation. I'm going to go through it very quickly and just highlight some of the things for purposes of this presentation. So basically, human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by the threat or use of kidnapping, force, fraud, or coercion, or by giving or receiving of unlawful payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person, and for the purpose of sexual exploitation or forced labor. For the purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus primarily on the crime of sex trafficking, not so much the crime of labor trafficking, in regards to services available for sex trafficking. Smuggling is very different from the crime of trafficking, whereas smuggling is a crime against the state. Not so much, it's not a crime against the person. So even though sometimes smuggling can be used in trafficking cases, it is a very different crime. So what a lot of people think human trafficking looks like, we're not going to go into the videos, but the links will be in the presentation for you to look at in the future, is a lot of people think it kind of looks like this. The best way to put it is the movie Taken, where a couple white girls are away on holiday in the UK, and then they're taken by this organized criminal enterprise, right? It doesn't look like that so much here in the States. I mean, it looks different everywhere, but here in the States, we're seeing about 10% of trafficking that is more your brute force mafia style trafficking. where it's highly organized enterprises. Here in San Diego County, we have some highly organized trafficking rings, which are mostly white biker gangs or Korean mafia, other little mafia types. And these rings are national. They're not just located in one area like San Diego County specifically. So when I say highly organized, they have circuits that go around the US, go around the world, or around the state. Okay, but it's really the brute force type of kidnapping style trafficking really doesn't happen that much. There is a video on here of a survivor story of what that looks like here, but it does not look like what we would think, in the movies where this girl's taken and her dad comes to rescue her, and her dad just happens to be in, this agent that is able to go after these people and find her. What it looks like here is primarily people that don't have family, people that are very vulnerable. They don't have a support system that are going to come after them and try to rescue them. What it looks like here, this is a great video making of a girl. I suggest you watch it on your own time. This is really kind of what it looks like here, where it's more the Romeo style trafficker pimp, which the majority of trafficking is primarily gang related for sex trafficking here in the US, here in the state of California and the city of San Diego County. It's primarily gang related, although there are opportunists, the CEO style pimp who's maybe running a modeling agency or some kind of music industry, or they're falling under, or an escort service, falling under some type of legitimate business that makes up a small percentage of those more opportunistic style traffickers. Or you have your befrienders that are also tied to gangs, that are the recruiters, not so much the Romeo style traffickers, which that still is the primary way of luring people into the lifestyle within the gangs. You have that 2-3 month period of romancing that get the person to fall in love with them, and then they're out there, they're being coerced and manipulated at that point to do other things, and they're thinking that really this is their choice. They're not necessarily seeing the victimization in it. What I want to highlight is the majority of these romantic, intimate partner trafficking style situationships are very violent at a certain point, right? So we talk about domestic violence with intimate partners, and we have the same thing happening on a different level with human trafficking when it comes to the intimate partner situationships, not really real true relationships. But after the few months of wine and dining, then the majority of the time, then it starts to become violent, and then it's more forced. Or they're getting beat if they don't bring enough money home at night, or if they lose money, or if they get robbed. And sometimes robberies are set up just to keep them controlled, or they're traded off to other pimps. And a lot of the time when they're with their pimps, they are partners, they're helping, but at the same time, they're also intimate with these partners. So that's why I'm calling these relationships more like situationships. They're not really what we would think of as a true relationship. But that's some of the intersectionality that I see when it comes to the pimp and victim relationships, when it comes to intimate partner relationships within these situationships. We have the befrienders, like I said, that go into the schools and bring in the younger kiddos that are 13, 14, 15, Average age of entry here in San Diego County is 15, 16 years old, into the lifestyle, and primarily the younger kiddos are being recruited by friends already into the life. So someone who is currently part of a stable of 4 or 5 other girls that is recruiting for their pimp. And then you have people that we call pocket pimps, who are boyfriends of their person who is maybe in the sex industry, in the porn industry, in the strip club industry, and they're benefiting off of, or OnlyFans, you know, they're benefiting financially off of the individual. I'm skipping through Catalea's experience. You can watch it on your own. It's a great example of recruitment, or the grooming process through, for her, it was through, her experience was, she had this religious sort of experience in her grooming process. And it's very relative to a lot of the experiences that folks have in some of these trafficking experiences, where they're coming out of cult-like religious experiences, and they're groomed that way for perpetrators, or they're legit being trafficked through these cults, which is not as common as the majority of the trafficking situations, but it does exist. So we have the adult entertainment industry, we have trafficking, we have pornography, we have prostitution. It's all inextricably linked together when it comes to sex trafficking. You cannot have one without the other. When it comes to the adult industry, you're either trafficked into it or you're trafficked out of it. Same thing with pornography. There was a study that was done out of LA County where the majority of the porn is generated. Up to 70% of the individuals in those industries are there against their will. They don't want to do it. And then you have street prostitution, or maybe it's in hotels or wherever it's taking place. Sex trafficking is prostitution. There's no other term for it. I'm just telling it like it is. This is a major issue across the US. The average age of entry is between the age of 12 to 14. Like I said, San Diego County, California, it's generally 15, 16 is the average age of entry. San Diego County alone, this is a huge, huge, huge industry, $810 million industry. This came from data out of the most recent study that was done in 2015. We haven't had another study done since, but the Padres alone are worth 800 million, or at the time of this study, you know, so that kind of gives you an idea of how large this industry is. So I'm going to skip through a lot of this for the sake of time. We already said this is primarily gang related for the sex trafficking. One of the myths is that pimping and traffickers are mostly associated with African American street gangs, and that is not correct. It looks different everywhere, different parts of the US. For example, in Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, it's primarily familial trafficking, where families are trafficking their own children. But here in San Diego County, we are seeing that the larger percent of traffickers are white, then Black, then Hispanic, and so on. So it's a pretty big mix. We'll be seeing a lot of the recruitment in schools, like I said, for the younger populations. It's just a given. They're sending the younger girls in to recruit other vulnerable people. So some of the recruitment factors for the younger kiddos is their runaway. They've been running away frequently, in and out of the house, disappearing for time, involved with an older boyfriend, involved with drugs or alcohol, lack of parental involvement, family members arranging or approving this commercial sexual exploitation of the minor. Maybe there's financial problems, personal involvement already with the pimp or gang member. Maybe there are family members involved in it, so it's generational. So their family's been involved in this lifestyle for decades. And then mental or emotional health needs, also disabilities, is another risk that creates vulnerability. We talked a little bit about how kiddos are recruited. Some of the recruitment hotspots for youth is trolley and bus stops, house parties, neighborhood parks near schools, alternative high schools. The open field in National City really for San Diego County is one of our biggest hubs for street prostitution, for trafficking, specifically sex trafficking. El Cajon Boulevard is one of the major blades. Social media also, since COVID, we've seen an increase in exploitation for youth through social media platforms, tattoo parlors, churches as well, and malls, anywhere where youth are going to be present. They'll try to make a presence. I'm going to skip through some of this stuff on CSEC, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the psychological effects for folks in this, okay? So when you have sexual abuse, early childhood sexual abuse seems to be the majority. It seems to be one of the leading factors pushing vulnerability into being exploited in this way. Just to give you a little bit of background on my work, I've been with the DA's office here at One Safe Place for a little over a year now. My expertise is human trafficking. I've been working with victims of human trafficking for the last 11 years. And I ran a housing program for adult survivors of trafficking. And then I also had my own program that was an emergency response program that provided emergent needs. So housing, hotels, Uber, airfare, food, whatever the emergent need was to help someone flee a situation of trafficking. I did that for about 5 years on the side while simultaneously running this other program for local shelter housing for survivors of trafficking. I've worked with over 2,000 individuals, male, female, children, all having these experiences. And so from my own experiences, not just the other studies that have been done, but from my own experiences working with these individuals, one of the top factors that pushed people to be vulnerable in this lifestyle was early childhood sexual abuse. But the number one factor is being just naive, not knowing about this type of exploitation. But we see the continuum of sexual abuse. This was done beautifully by Kathy Hardy. She's with Freedom from Exploitation. She's allowed me to use this for educational purposes, but she did it beautifully here. So I'm just gonna go through it real quickly with you. But the linking of love and sex and abuse, right? That first initial point, because she explained it beautifully what a lot of the individuals I worked with share, right? These are the things that happened to them when they were younger, and they have this skew, this twisted view now of what a healthy relationship looks like because of the past because of the past sexual abuse or experiencing abuse. So the majority of the folks, like I said, probably over 90% of the individuals that I serve personally experienced early childhood sexual abuse. But then there's another group of that experienced domestic violence in their home. They witnessed it, right? So they're a combination of early sexual abuse and then also witnessing domestic violence. And so they have this twisted version of what healthy is. So abuse equals love, sex equals love, right? So that creates that violation of boundaries initially. And then that guilt and shame that just gets put onto them by their abuser let's say it's a family member, the majority of those who are sexually assaulted as children, it's by someone that they know or a family member, a trusted person in their family, in their life. They start viewing themselves as sexual objects. They have low self-esteem. Maybe they're running away and or homeless. They are experiencing poverty and need. So one of the easy ways, because when you're out there on the streets, you are met by a perpetrator within the first 3 to 4 days of being out there, either a buyer who's willing to purchase or someone who's willing to exploit you and sell you. Because you want McDonald's, you want food, you want a roof over your head, you have a need, or you just need to feel like you belong with a community, right? So that's when the sexual exploitation can begin. Unequal power dynamics of adult and child relationship. This is very much part of the process with that early childhood sexual abuse. But also in the cult system where people are being brought up and groomed in these unhealthy views where the way they look at authority, the authority figures in their life, it's a very unequal power dynamic. Then you have the media influence. We have the OnlyFans glamorization. We have stripping glamorized through our music industry and Hollywood. And it's for our youth, it's definitely one of the things that can help normalize this as a viable way to make money, right? So maybe they're, because of the need or their poverty, they're using that media influence to kind of allow them to be more vulnerable to accepting that type of exploitation as a way to make a living. And then again, you have the demand, and you're always going to be approached by a recruiter or a pimp or a buyer. Some of the psychological and emotional impacts is disruption of healthy psychological development. This is when this is happening as you're a child. Your self-concept, intimacy, beliefs, and goals are going to be, like I said, twisted a little bit. The post-traumatic stress disorder, actually complex PTSD, is more like it. The majority of individuals that I served personally had been diagnosed with complex PTSD, almost 100%. Impulsive to revisit traumatic events, intrusive emotions, memories, flashbacks, hyperarousal, exaggerated startle reaction, panic symptoms, self-injurious and suicidal behavior, dissociative disorders. PTSD and disassociation are the top two psychological and emotional impacts that I have seen personally in the people that I've assisted. Hands down, the most common. Clinical depression, paranoia, anxiety, explosive outbursts, sleep disturbance, nightmares, bond with perpetrators is another thing too that's really, really hard to explain. But those of you, who are very experienced in domestic violence and the Stockholm syndrome and all of it, and that trauma bond, understanding that trauma bond, it's the same thing with those who have experienced trafficking. And then there's that hypersexualization also. Emotional impacts is maybe anger and rage, deep emotional pain. They are grieving the loss of a life that they could have had. They are grieving the loss of support that they maybe never had or had temporarily. They're grieving the loss of relationships. Even when they're separated from their traffickers, they're in another stage of grief, grieving that separation. They go through multiple stages of grief. Stigma and exploitation, the stigma of exploitation is one of the things that definitely does haunt these individuals. They've got those feelings of humiliation and shame, self-blame, self-loathing, sometimes loss of sexual desire. But then also you have that hypersexualization on other ends. Spiritual impact is despair, hopelessness, lack of belief in humanity, lack of faith in spiritual power, One of the things that I always say when I'm talking to individuals that are working with these folks is that for a holistic level of healing, we need to reach them on the psychological, emotional, social, physical, financial, environmental, physical, the mental health, all of it, but also the spiritual is very, very important. So encouraging folks in whatever faith they have or however they view spirituality, it's huge that they're able to come back to some type of balance within that part of themselves for full holistic healing. And then we have the physical impact, which is STDs, STIs, HIV, loss of bowel controls, pregnancies unwanted or wanted, sterility, facial dental reconstruction, tattoos and brandings, brain damage by, being hit in the head too many times or just having too many incidences, substance abuse and addiction is part of it, self-cutting, suicide, or death. One of the things that we don't talk about enough with human trafficking victims is that they experience at the rates that they experience strangulation. Okay, so let me put it into perspective a little bit. When you have an intimate partner relationship and you're experiencing strangulation in that relationship, maybe it's the pimp or their partner, and then you go out and your quota is so much a night, you have to meet with 10, 15 people per night. You have individuals, and the studies show the majority of those habitual buyers are very sadistic and they're very power hungry. They don't view the individual that they're purchasing as a person. They like to play out rape fantasies, and it's very, very ugly and very, very violent, almost more than the violence they endure at the hands of their traffickers. And some of the things that I've seen at the hands of buyers is absolutely horrific. But you have, those experiences. It's just you don't know at what point of the night you're going to be strangled by a buyer. You just don't know when that day is going to be your last. And that's something that I feel needs to be talked about more. The risk of death by strangulation in these instances, they're going to experience strangulation at higher rates than you would in a normal traditional relationship. And it's something that really is not talked about, and I don't think I've seen any studies actually on it. So I'm going to end here pretty much and just kind of go into services for those who are trafficked in the county. Obviously here at One Safe Place, we do help all victimization types, right? But we do also help survivors of trafficking. We are connected to the majority of trafficking programs that assist survivors of trafficking. So one of the things that we do here at One Safe Place is we make those connections. If we find that someone's been trafficked, we're able to get them connected to legal assistance. If they are here as they're an immigrant, they're experiencing exploitation, we can help them with the VAWA process through legal partnerships that we have, different housing programs, different therapy programs, just depends on what the need is for the individual, and we link them for services. So we're pretty connected here with One Safe Place. Like I said, we're pretty much partnered with every agency that is serving these individuals. And therefore, it's a one-stop shop. They can get all the services that they need in one go. Primarily, we also do provide a peer support group here at One Safe Place for victims of sex trafficking who are ready to have that part of their healing come into play when it comes to peer support and also that environmental and social health, right? So that's a huge factor in that. One of the biggest things is to be able to provide peer support for these individuals. If they can see somebody else has made it out of this type of exploitation, they're living a good life, they're living the best life, life does not end after, that experience, their life goes on. It gives them hope. And so that's one of the biggest things that we've been able to see, or that I've been able to see working with individuals, regardless whether it's here at One Safe Place or in other agencies. The peer support component is one of the biggest components in their healing process. Therapy, like I said, that holistic approach, you want to be able to meet all of their needs. And the recidivism rate is extremely high with these individuals. And that's primarily because a need is not being met. So we need to figure out what are those needs, and a thorough process, a thorough needs assessment is going to be really helpful in that. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. I'm probably over time. So if there's any questions, or if we even have time for that, I'll turn it over to Amelia.
We absolutely have time for questions. And there is a question from Shalyn in the chat box. But if you're okay, Shalyn, can I unmute you? Because you have a multi-part question. So.
Okay. I was just asking for just an example of the grooming techniques that are used to slowly capture victims into the trafficking lifestyle. And then also, why is it now referred to as the life, or is that something different?
Okay, so the reference, the lifestyle or the life, I actually am not sure who coined that term, but it's been going around for over the last 15 years or so. The folks that I work with across the US use it. It's just another way of identifying. It may be because folks don't necessarily admit to being a victim of trafficking initially when they're coming out of exploitation, right? So it's easier for them to say, oh no, it's just the lifestyle that I'm living. It's just, so it's just an easier way when you're working with victims, because they don't identify right away as being trafficking victims. And then in answer to your other question, the grooming process, it looks different for everyone. Some of these traffickers who are, gosh, there's several books on Amazon on how to be a pimp, how to recruit, and they use psychological techniques, and it's very, very detailed. I don't suggest reading any of them because it's so maddening to see that these are the things that people are actually buying and using to exploit other people. But even on another level, where you have, recruiters going in and befriending vulnerable people, it just depends on the need. They're looking at what the gaps are, right? They're looking at what their vulnerabilities are, and they're going to exploit that. They're going to fill that need, whether it be food, a place to stay, love and belonging, this fake sense of, love and belonging. They're going to give them what they most desire, what they most need. They're going to fill that need, and they're going to pull them in that way. But grooming looks different on a lot of levels. So that could be your initial trafficker, recruiter style grooming. But then you also have other types of grooming, like your life as a grooming tool. Let's say you're growing up in a sexually abusive home, or you're a home of domestic violence, or maybe you're living in a home, in a household that's already in the lifestyle. That is another grooming form of grooming, right? You're living it, you're seeing it every day. It's being normalized. Yeah. A lot of our social media I see it as a way of grooming individuals to be susceptible to exploitation, sexual exploitation. It just depends on the individual and what their vulnerabilities are.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. I'm looking to see if there are any other questions in the chat. Really just wanted to share our appreciation. Thank you. San Diego is very lucky to have someone like you, Marjorie, to share your expertise and the services that you and also other agencies offer to survivors of trafficking. And as she mentioned earlier, this is actually a 2-hour presentation. So I believe, is your email address in the PowerPoint presentation? Is this something you can share as a PDF?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
so I'll share the full PowerPoint. You're welcome to look through it. I do have my contact information at the end.
Wonderful. So that was such wonderful, powerful information, eye-opening. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your passion, and and all these valuable resources with us. And just we are very, very grateful for One Safe Place here in North San Diego County. So,
Of course, thank you for having me.
thank you.
All right.
And as I mentioned, we have lots and lots of wonderful events happening for October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Because there's so much going on, you will not be seeing a general meeting on the third Tuesday because we already have a full calendar. So we do go dark on the third Tuesday of the month, but there will be a whole host of announcements and flyers coming your direction. And so please take advantage of it. If your organization is interested in tabling at any of the regional events, there won't be tabling at the opening event, but please reach out to the event coordinators if you would like to host a resource table at either of the events in Central Region